Gentlemen, welcome back to the Front Row Dads podcast. If you're brand new here, I'm John Vroman. This is the show for family men with businesses, not businessmen with families. Today, I'm talking about how Burning Man made me a better dad and husband. I'm joined by my new friend, Joshua Wenner, and Joshua had a huge impact on me at the burn. We'll get into that story here in just a minute. But guys, before I introduce Josh and we get rolling with the combo, two things I want you to know. The first is that we have 2 online summits for the remaining part of the year. Our Business Evolution Summit is September 22nd. As this drops, it may be actually happening. So if you missed that one, then you can join our Emotional Intelligence Summit, which is in November. And that is a perfect segue actually to talk about Burning Man, because I went thinking it was one thing, walked away knowing it was something different. And again, more on that in just a second. But the last thing I want you to know about men is that we have an in-person event, December 2nd through the 4th here in Austin, Texas. And another segue into Burning Man, my great friend, Preston Smiles, will be speaking there. It is going to be an awesome event, 150 high-performing, high-achieving, hard-charging dudes who want to be epic family men. And there's no event like it in the world. It's the first of its kind. We hope to see you there. It is open to members of Front Row Dads and those who are thinking about being members of Front Row Dads. So if you want more information, go to frontrowdads.com/live. So I weaved in a few things here. I talked about Preston, who is actually the person who immediately connected me to Joshua and this camp at Burning Man. And also Joshua and the work that he does was transformative for me at this event. And I'm sure that we'll get to that particular piece. But Joshua is somebody who leads men. And in fact, here's what I wouldn't, this is not in his official bio, but Joshua is the type of person that when he walked out into the camp, I didn't know who he was, but I looked at Joshua, the way he carried himself, the way and I was like, that person's important. I don't know why, but he is clearly commanding some respect in this room, in this space. And then over a course of 6 days, I found out exactly why that was the case. And he works with veterans and first responders and other high achievers. And I can't wait to get into this conversation. And nobody held the container. Nobody held the space better than Joshua. His presence, how grounded he was, how rooted he was. It literally brought such a positive energy to our camp of what was 100+ people. And Joshua, I'm thrilled that we get a chance to do this like debrief here, this recap of the experience and bring a little bit of the Burning Man spirit to the Front Row Dads community. Some are familiar, some aren't. So welcome to the show, my brother. And I'm excited for this.
Thank you so much, John. Fully received that and just honored to get to know you at a much deeper level. I think, we come out there for the desert. I was out there for 8 days. You're out there for 6, but you don't realize you're going to get really close with some people. And you got new soul family, new brothers that weren't on the coming in, but coming out, you're just really deeply connected. So really grateful to be on with you and have so much respect and admiration for the work you're doing in the world and for you. So grateful.
Thank you, man. That means a lot. And yeah, people can try all day long to explain what this is about, and we will try. We will do our best. But it is one of those things you have to experience, and the experience is different for everybody who goes and what they walk away with and the lessons they've learned. But the fact remains, every single person that was in that camp was transformed in some way, shape, or form. They got maybe not what they wanted, maybe not what they came for intellectually, but in their spirit, they walked away with exactly what they needed. So let's actually give a little context here. And first of all, Burning Man is 70 or 80,000 people, whatever it is, that get together. Yep. Black Rock City. It's a flat, dusty plain, and everybody brings their hearts, and along with their bikes and their RVs and their art creations and their music and gifts to give, and they all descend on this desert, and they basically create this incredible culture for 7 days. But more specifically for you, Joshua, I want you to talk about why does Burning Man matter to you? Because I think that'll really set the stage. And the purpose of this conversation, of course, like we spoke about, is that like we talk about everything here on the Front Row Dads podcast, but through the lens of, well, how does it relate to family? And that couldn't be a better setup for why Burning Man means so much to you and how the Wanderers Camp came to be. So give us a little context, if you will.
Yeah, and I've been going to Burning Man since 1998 was my first year. So this is my 17th year. So I've been out there a long time. We actually grew up hunting out there. So I grew up with my family. My dad would take us out hunting. My mom would go hunting. She wouldn't hunt, but she'd be out there with us. So literally at Burning Man's, picture Burning Man, if you go, 5-10 miles over in one direction, that's actually where we used to grow up and hunt,
Wow.
and shoot birds. I got my antelope out there. So I was always out there seeing these big festivals. And my dad used to work for Reno PD, and he'd be like, oh, those are a bunch of hippies, And so, but then I went in 98. We convinced my mom to go first. And I would go with my brother. My brother and I would camp together. We'd camp at different camps. And then we got my mom to camp because my dad was still a no. But once my mom said yes, he's like, well, then I'm going to go to make sure she's okay. And once they went, they brought a small little crew, and they had the time of their lives. And then they're like, all right, we're going to go every year. So initially, my brother and I were camping separate than them. And a big part of the culture is authenticity. You really get to feel safe to be your authentic self through whether it's expression, giving, projects. Like you can explore your edges a little bit to find out like, who am I? And so out with it out there, eventually I was with a crew that wasn't really helping to break down camp. We were building, and then there'd be 20 of us building, and then there'd be 3 of us breaking down. And I was like, my parents will break down and build. I can count on them. They're responsible. So I was like, hey, let's camp with them. Another big thing that I think is really important with families is so much of the time, the reason I said authentic is I think so much of the time we have like the son archetype, and we have a father or a parent and a child. And so much of the time we're hiding who we are to like be a good example as parents, or as children. We don't want to let our parents down. So we only show the mask of a parent and a child. And at Burning Man, you're authentic. And I was like, I had a lot of death early on. And I was like, I'd rather they know who I really am versus the mask I'm putting on. So eventually I have to take the mask off. Burning Man's the perfect place to do it. So that became kind of the intersect of let's camp together. I know there's going to be some conflict. Back then I was partying a lot more than I do now. I knew there was going to be some of that conflict to be radically authentic with them. So made the decision. We camped with them that year. Of course, there's a little bit of uncomfortability. And then after that, we settled in, and it was a really great experience. And then later that year, in December that year, so that was August-ish. And then December that year, my brother died of a heroin overdose. And definitely, as any parent has gone through the loss of a child or a sibling, loss of a family member, it's really tragic. I do a lot of grief and trauma work, and 50% of families break apart because of their different grieving styles. Some people want to clean everything up and tuck it away. Other people want to like be around it and constantly be immersed in it. And my parents had those 2 different styles, where my dad just kind of wanted to move forward. And my mom, his room was untouched for 13 years, by the way. So just gives you a contrast of their different styles. But one of the things we did do together is we started to celebrate my brother, and we started to look for signs and look for things. And so one thing we did as a family, as a ritual, is we built a little out in the desert across from Burning Man. We built a little temple and put his ashes out there. And then we decided, hey, actually, why don't we actually create a camp and turn it dedicated to my brother? So my brother, his name was the Wanderer, his Burning Man name. And so we dedicated the Wanderers Camp. And for us, there's a beautiful temple out there. Every year since he's died, we've created a tribute. And I've done some sort of a forgiveness ceremony, which started with myself and then has kind of taken shape. But that's kind of the birth of what this meant, is how do we celebrate my brother? And instead of focusing on the pain and the absence and the loss, how do we focus on his presence, his life, what it means to be alive, our connections with each other, and how do we really start to create family and community? And so that was the origin in 2009. And it's progressed, a bunch of friends bringing their parents. And it's really turned into a camp where this year, as you mentioned, we had 100 plus people of all different backgrounds, people from all over the world. And it really is family, where we're trying to break down the walls of just people living in silos, where as people get older, they hang out with people their age. And as people are younger, they hang out. How do we blend those and really create a sense of culture and community? And the last thing I'll say before we move forward is, selfishly, when I read the Blue Zones, I was reading Blue Zones around the oldest living people on the planet. And one of the common attributes, it's a good book that says, is it genetic or is it behavioral? And when I was researching it, it was talking about the behavioral traits. And this guy did a study for years on all these oldest living populations. And one of the things was they actually had community. And the elders get to learn and like want to be around for the youngins and the children and the grandchildren. And then we actually learn from their wisdom. And so it really helps the community. And so selfishly, even though there was like cooler camps or more exotic camps, I was like, I want my parents to live as long as they can. Now that my brother's gone, it's just us. So how do I create community so that they're around people that are my age, because they're in their 70s, I'm in my 40s. How do I constantly have them invigorated, going out with me and my friends and having fun with us, so that really they could stay alive as long as they possibly can. And so that was my, I think, hidden intention behind it. But now it's turned into family, community, a really grounded camp, a really safe camp. We're really protective about the people we bring in, and it has to be that culture where people are family, community.
That's exactly right. Oh, so many things that you just said there that I want to mention. First, if I go back to the beginning, when you're like contemplating doing the camp with your parents, you're like, whatever you said, they're like, they'll help tear down and set up. But what I heard was, they're good people.
Mhm.
I want to be around them. And I then fast forwarded in my life to wondering how my kids would talk about me in that way. Like, yeah, they're good people. I want to be around them. That's such a cool family brand. The other thing that you mentioned was interesting. I never saw this, but I got so concerned with costumes. Like, what do I wear? And what I recognize is it's mask. You might be costuming up, you might be adding the costume, but you're really taking the mask down. And that's an interesting way to look at this experience is, and this was a question that was brought to me early on, was because the whole costume thing, when it came up, I was like, oh, what do I wear? I started to get all stressed out about it. I'm like, that's not me. I'm not going to do that. That's not my style, or that's not who I am. And they go, well, what about you do you want to bring forward? What about you within you is not being expressed? Or how might you express that which is in you? And that interesting piece of like, mask down, but the costume becomes this expression, this positive expression, where the mask is this metaphorical how we present ourselves with our ego and the front that we have to the world, so that they see us a certain way. But at Burning Man, it's like, see me as you wish, and I think that's a really cool piece of it. And then the last thing is, I want to mention and compliment you, Joshua, on the forgiveness ceremony. Because again, going into Burning Man, you have all these expectations, the music that you might see, the art you might see. The forgiveness ceremony that you led that morning at whatever time it was, close to sunrise, was so soulful and so meaningful and so heart moving. I remember standing there thinking that this was nothing about what I expected from Burning Man. Nothing. At this beautiful temple where people are respecting and honoring those in life and things they wanted to say goodbye to or have said goodbye to. It was just such a beautiful ceremony as we all stood around in a circle, and you talked about dust and us returning back to dust. And we talked about, and I repeated the phrase, and again, I'm not going to walk through the whole ceremony, but there was a phrase in there. It was, tell me if I'm right, if I'm gotten this, it was, I forgive you. I forgive. What was that? What was the incantation?
It's I forgive myself. I forgive you. Please forgive me.
Yeah. And I remember repeating that to myself. I remember that anchoring and bringing that into conversations. I think that my asking for forgiveness and my forgiving myself was a quantum leap in that space of how it felt, because of the anchor that you gave me, because of where that happened and who I was and how open I was, and the story of your family that was tied to that. It really gave me a new way to look at forgiveness. So thank you. There is so much that happened, dude, over those days. I was starting to think about how on earth could I talk about all this, but here's what I thought we could do. Let's go back to the beginning for a minute and let's walk through a few of the things that happened. First of all, let's give some love to Preston, because Preston Smiles, who in many ways, I was laughing. I was like, he's everywhere. In 1 minute, he's leading this group of people going out on their bikes. Another minute, he's solving some problem with the RV. Another minute, he's standing on top of the RV, tying a tarp down. And then he's wearing these incredible costumes. And then he's just chilling and talking to people. Like, it felt like he was everywhere all the time. And he was so cool and collected. And just, I have this vision of Preston just rallying people, us riding right through the middle of the night, and Preston just taking this group of whatever it was, 20, 30 more people on their bikes, all going out to, visit this camp and pay our respect over here to people we love, and then go dancing over here. I just wanted to honor Preston. And I know you have a lot of love for Preston too. But what you both have created here collectively together, that was fun to witness and to watch.
Yeah, it's that's part of what happens is you basically find like who are your people, and then everybody's giving their gifts. And that's really what it
Yes.
is. Like if I had to summarize what Burning Man represents, you're immersed in this space where so many people come to give their gifts. And so it's constantly leaving you inspired, excited, heart open, brought to your knees, dancing sporadically. Like there's so much, it's the largest interactive art festival in the world is really how I frame it. And
Yeah.
Preston's gift, that's what he's really good at. He's really good at people. He's really good at enrolling people. He's really good at leading people. He's got a huge open heart, cares deeply about people. So it was really beautiful. And that's really where the trajectory is going, is like, I was about done. And he's like, I'm going to go forever. And I was like, well, you're not one of my best friends. So if you're going to go forever and you want to collaborate on this, like, let's start to use this as testing ground. And so that's where that started to come. He's like, all right, man. And so I think he brought in 40 or so people from Austin, and surrounding areas. So that was kind of a big part of us coming in. And I got to say, because I know you do a lot of men's work as well in your community, and it's powerful for men to have really deep brotherhood, have really good tools, and to trust each other to lead. And so that's part of even what we notice is like, oh, how do we model leading with each other of like, oh, you got this and I trust you fully, and
Totally.
And pass the torch. Because I think as men, it's like, I'll lead if there's no leader, or I love to be led too. So if there's a strong leader, I'm like, thank you, man, you got the space. I'll focus on something else for us to take care of. So I think between all of us, and there's a lot of other strong men like yourself there that were just holding so many anchors that it was like, it just felt great. That's part of what created the richness of the cultures. Like, oh, we could pass the torch in a lot of areas to a lot of different men that can hold the space, lead the space, ground the space, support the space. And when there's something that happens, because there's always a blowout, and sometimes it's me, sometimes it's somebody else, we have other strong men or community or allies to support us and to help us navigate through it.
Speaking of blowouts, so let's go there for a second. All right. Started out, like, mine was a roller coaster for sure. Amazing experience. And then Tatyana and I find out that apparently you can't run away from your marital problems on the playa, and your childhood wounds, a lot of your insecurities, a lot of if there's a rub there, you're likely going to find it in the middle of a dust storm, in the middle of the desert, without all your amenities to escape to, all your comforts to go hide in. And dude, that happened to us. And we hit a very tough moment. We don't have time. I would happily unpack this for all the men of all of what happened, but I want to get to the essence of it, because some of it's a story and it's a little bit of the drama, and many times it's not important. What was really important was that I was in a tough spot, and you, in the middle of the night, at midnight, sat down with me at the camp, and you led me, just the two of us, through an experience that I can only summarize as a journey into my childhood, an awakening and an awareness to an experience in my life when I was younger, when I got into a fight on the playground that I would have told you a month ago really was resolved and had no issues. And after a few minutes of being in this space, and by a few minutes, I mean, we were together for 2 hours talking, dude, I'm bawling, I'm crying. Like what you were able to do in that short period of time, relatively speaking, and how you were able to have me relate to my younger self, and the fact that you so presently held space for me at 12 midnight, 1 a.m. up till 2 a.m. in the middle of Burning Man, I was almost in awe of the fact that you would do that. I was like, what the fuck, man? Like, doesn't Josh, he'd much rather be partying. He'd much rather be sleeping. Like, this cannot be what this man wants to do. But one of the things I learned, and I'll credit Russ for this, who was in our camp, was I was talking to him and I'm like, yeah, these guys, all these people are like legends in their own space. Like, dude, I don't know if I should be dropping names, but let's just say I won't drop names. There were some legends in the coaching and leadership and community space right there with us in our camp. And I remember saying to Russ, I'm like, I don't want to ask them for help. That's what they do for a living. They didn't come to Burning Man to do this. And he goes, John, Burning Man's not a party. It's a community. And this is what people do because they love to. And if they didn't want to, they wouldn't agree to it or offer it. Give them some credit that they are yeses and nos confidently in their life. So dude, it took a lot for me to let go of the I'm a burden wound and to sit with you and have you guide me through this. But what we got to, the punchline in many ways, was that my nervous system you were helping me to regulate my nervous system. And you helped me to see that my nervous system and how I bring that to my engagements with my wife and my kids and my work is perhaps the one thing that I overlooked and underestimated for the last number of years of my life. And maybe I had clues into it. Maybe there was ways that I could see it. Well, that's kind of nervous system. Yeah, if you meditate, you're kind of regulating your nervous system, but not directly. Like, these are the words: nervous system. This is what happens. This is what happens when you're in fight or flight. And because of the work you do with the type of people, the first responders, the veterans, the grief work, all of this, the experiences that you've had in your life, and now the trainings that you've been through, dude, you were the most unexpected gift at Burning Man for me. And I was ready to go home. And then I ended up staying. And then on the last night, I had the best night of my life. So we can get to that too. But dude, at an inflection point, there you were, fully present. And thank you. So my question is this: the fuck did you do? Like, talk to us a little bit about, and I realized you could speak to this for an hour, right? But like, give me a little bit of a sense, give the men a sense of like, what happened there? What are we doing with the nervous system? And again, I know you could talk for hours on this, so it's unfair that I'm giving you only the time that I am, but try your best to unpack what just happened there for us.
Yeah. And first, thank you, man. I really, really appreciate that. It was an honor. Like as Russ mentioned, I'll just support that. I love the work that I do. I do it because I love it. And it's an honor, especially in community, right? When we have community, that's the honor. And I think as men, we block the exits for each other. Like, we all want to run. So you're not alone in that. We all want to run when things get difficult, or numb, or engage, or go somewhere else, because that is our nervous system in a fight or flight response. And so what ends up happening is unconsciously in childhood, and again, it still happens to us today, but the body's built for survival. And specifically the back of our brains, which is the reptilian part, which comes online first in little kids. When we're developing, it comes online because it runs our autonomic nervous system, which basically means everything in your body you don't think about, from your lungs breathing to your heart beating to everything that has to run without thought, is your autonomic nervous system. So what happens is, as we move into fight or flight, the body's built to protect us for danger, for survival. And so early on, if we have a traumatic event, or we have something that experiences as deep pain or potential survival, which could either be emotional or physical, a potential threat to our survival, the brain links up what's called the non-conscious emotional bias. And it basically, for shortcut, says, if this is danger, put me into fight or flight so I can either get out of there and get away from danger. That would be the flight. I can fight and actually go directly into conflict, which a lot of us, that's our primary. You'll see fighters there. They love to engage. They're going to jump right into conflict. Or you see other parts that freeze or appease. So we have these different primary responses, and there's a lot more depth, but that just gives a high level. And so when we're not present and aware of the nervous system, it hijacks us, and it's reactionary. Because again, on atomic, you're not thinking about your lungs. You're not thinking about your heart. It's running on automatic reaction for survival. So the nervous system is the awareness to learn, when am I in a relaxed, calm state? Because when I'm in a relaxed, calm state, you get access to the last part of your brain that doesn't come online till right about when insurance rates drop, which is about 25, 26. And this is the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of your brain right up front, if you tap your forehead. And this is compassion, empathy, and rational thinking. And so what happens is, when we go offline, we essentially go right to the back of our brain, because it's survival response, and it'll move us into one of those reactions, which essentially is how we survive childhood. So to kind of tie the two together with what we did with this, is in the moment, something triggered, right? And again, it could have had nothing to do with you and Tatyana. However, I do find the deeper we open to love, the deeper we open our hearts, that's where all the triggering comes from, because
yes,
it's fear of loss, right? So out there, your hearts are blown open. You're in these really loving states. And then the people we love the most, especially with couples, there's a tendency for our shit to come up, because it's coming up because there's the fear of loss. There's the fear of abandonment. There's the fear I'm not enough. I may not be loved. All those fears come up. And if they trigger something unconsciously from childhood, boom, we're automatically moved into that reaction of fight, flight, freeze, appease. And in it, we'll just go react to we're trying to get safety. We're like, let me get out of here so I can get safety again, so I can feel safe again. And so the awareness of it is, yes, there's regulation tools we can use to actually regulate our nervous system to bring us back online, which require practice and repetition to really get comfortable with those. But in general, where we were at in the desert, there wasn't a whole lot of time to prep it. So it was more, I could see what was happening, was happy to give. And this is the focus of my work. So what the process we did was, think of, there's different types of therapy, a lot of talk therapies where you're thinking through it in the head, you're talking, you're thinking, but you're still here. And then there's somatic based therapies that are body based. And so I use a combination of a bunch of them that I've stacked together, that because I've been doing it a long time. But basically what we do is we get into the body, we go into wherever we're activated or triggered. We notice the sensation, if it's in the chest or in the stomach or in the throat or in the head, there's usually one place that it comes up. And then we go into that and we be with that part of us. And that part of us will now take us to a past memory. So it's a closed eye process. It takes us to a past memory. And now you're working in the subconscious. You're actually present and to what's happening, but your brain takes a little bit of a break, and you're now letting the body, the issues are stored in the tissues. We're letting that sensation in the body, that tension, that pressure, whatever's happening when we're activated, take us to the first memory of where that happened. And then we blow up that memory and we can actually dialogue with different parts of the self. It's called either Gestalt or internal family systems for people that are knowing different therapies. But essentially we're dialoguing with aspects and finding out, who are we? What age are we?
Yeah.
What's happening? What's the world? What's our model of the world? What are our beliefs at this time? What do we make sense of what it's happening? And then we're able to actually coach. Our adult self is able to coach our child self. We're able to reconnect with that little child in us. And in doing so, a lot of times what we're doing is connecting and then empathizing. And then we're just feeling those parts of ourselves, and we're empathizing the part that didn't get to be expressed back to childhood when this painful memory happened, that we felt abandoned, alone, hurt, upset, humiliated. Something happened and we made a story or a belief around it. And so we're going back there, listening to the story and having deep compassion with that child in us that usually somebody wasn't there. We were by ourselves, we were alone. And when we can feel the emotion, that's when the sadness or grief or whatever's anger, whatever's there will come out. And then there's deep compassion afterward. And then there's usually coaching that the child has. So it's a really beautiful process where we essentially find the child in us, connect with the child in us, coach the child in us to regain safety, to regain whatever we need in the moment, reassurance, safety, connection, like, oh, you got me. And then we're now regulated and in touch with ourselves. And then the child usually has wisdom for whatever we're working on. Like, oh, what do I need? Because we already know. So if I had to summarize it, what we're doing is getting out of our heads and we're getting deep into our hearts.
Yeah.
And we're able to break through the armor that we typically have up in our heads, defenses. And once we can drop in the heart knows. And so the inner child is a representation of our hearts, of our deepest knowing, without the fear or control or wounding or all that. It just feels, here's the truth. And then we can hear it easily.
Yeah. So much of learning to listen to our children is learning to listen to our inner child. And that is something that became radically clear to me. I felt so much more connected to my 10-year-old, a 13-year-old and an 8-year-old, almost 8-year-old. But so this 10-year-old was like right in between my two boys, this version of myself that I was talking to. And I felt like when I came back to my kids, I was so much more connected and dialed in because I had found that place within myself. And it kind of sounds like, yeah, John, I hear you, like connect with your inner child. But first of all, how do I do that? Where do I go? What, and do I really have the time for this? Can't you give me like the 3 steps to be more present this Saturday? Because I don't know that it feels like, maybe a daunting task, but I can't recommend more highly for you gentlemen listening to this to go explore this work, whether it's with Joshua or somebody else that does the type of work that Joshua does, but check out what he's doing because this is his specialty. Like this is what he does. I have to say something else too. This is maybe going to be a loose connection, but I'm going to try to package this because it's new to me. This is fresh. What I'm sharing is fresh. When we were talking, Joshua, something came up was like, where do you feel it? I remember saying I felt it in my hands, right? I felt it in my hands. Like I felt a lot of this. Now it was interestingly, I didn't put all these dots together until I got home. But one is like this trauma had to do with a fight on the playground. And I was feeling all this in my hands. I never pieced all this together. And then I have noticed that how I've dealt when I explode is I punch shit, a wall, a metal ladder, something. Typically it's not healthy. It's luckily not my family, but I'm punching something to get this energy out of my hands. Well, after we were back from Burning Man, I was at 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu with my 8-year-old who practices there. And I'm sitting and I'm in the gym, and I literally look over and I see these men just punching the bag, kicking the bag. And I jump up off my seat. I walk up to the front desk. I go, dude, I want in. Literally, give me everything. Give me the pads, give me the clothes, give me the mount, give me everything. I'm literally taking the class in 15 minutes. I want to punch shit. and dude, it was so therapeutic to be in this class, because there's many ways that I'm learning to regulate my nervous system. But one of them is getting the energy out and knowing that I feel it in my hands, punching things in a healthy way, right? Is actually one of the most therapeutic things for me. And I never saw the tapestry come together like it has when this little, you have a little illumination over here of this childhood fight. And then you have this little illumination where you ask me where I'm feeling it. It's in my hands. And then I have this illumination in the gym that, like, my inner guidance system is saying, you need to do this, right? No matter how uncomfortable this might be, right? I'm not looking to train to be a professional fighter, but man, all this started to feel good. And the last thing I'll say, and I really want to get your perspective on this, is that you mentioned this a little bit ago, like you talk about being open, right? And all of what's possible when you're open. For months now, I have been open. I have opened up. I've gone to therapy. I've been doing all sorts of medicine work and all this stuff, right? I've massively opened. But the one thing that I underestimated was, when you open and you're like, let me source this wound and this wound and this wound, you may not be, it's like stacking on weights where you're like, they said therapy's good, more weights, the better. Isn't it resistant, right? And then at some point you're like, this is too much weight. I need to stop stacking things on for a moment. Right. And for me, this was like when I'm opening and I'm like receiving shadow work, dark side, trauma, childhood, and eventually I needed to like just get into my masculine again, and then just put the blinders on and go. And what happened at Burning Man was I experienced both opposite ends of that spectrum, from the open, feminine flow to the driven, focused, a builder in me, and being able to bring those home and now consciously integrate those two energies has been a total game changer for me. But I was missing my masculine drive, my masculine energy. But being around, like you said, I'm going full circle to all these men who had it, even when I didn't at that moment, to witness them, to watch them, to have it modeled in front of me, that was badass.
Yeah, we need other men. Men need other men, and it's so important. And I do think just a couple other pieces there. I'm a big advocate of picking one. I know it's exciting to get in, especially as achievers. Like, give me all the things.
Yeah,
I'm ready. Give it all to me. But the more I've done, the deeper and deeper I do work, I've learned it's not just the work, but it's the work between sessions. Let's call it. And because I know with the nervous system work, whoever gets the best results is who applies the tools. Like, so it's not just the sessions, it's the application, and it's going to require new habits. It's going to require new rituals. It's going to require changing, like the integration work. And that's what I'm really hearing from you is like, oh, you're in the integration phase. You did a lot of work to open up. It helped you get to places you couldn't find on your own. You needed a little bit of support there. But once you found them, now you're like, okay, how do I integrate what I've been learning? How do I rep it? How do I find new common pieces? And one other piece I'll make a comment is, I think a lot of times the anger, well, for men, we've been shown, hey, anger is okay. We've also been shown it's not okay from the feminine. So there's this mixed inner conflict with us with anger. But what I'm finding is anger is a really valid resource to get us into movement. It can move energy really quickly. It can move us into action. So I'm a big advocate of anger, but it's just in creating a healthy place to offload it so we don't take it out, because if not, it becomes a pressure cooker. And then we do attack the people that we love. And anger is a bodyguard to fear and sadness. So typically when we feel anger, it wasn't safe to express fear or wasn't safe to express sadness. So we learned anger as the primary emotion. So we can get to anger easy if we can access it. Some men can't access it at all, which requires other work. But if you do access anger and you're a man listening to this, hey, find a healthy outlet. Like one of the things I love to do is I'll get on my bed, I'll get on the hands and knees, and I'll just beat the shit out of my bed. And I can also yell and scream and primarily actually get into the pillows, and like, it's not too loud and obstructive, but I can really offload as much as I need to. And then a lot of times there's sadness afterward. Like I can actually sit and feel, and I'm like, oh, what's beneath the anger? What were you protecting me from? So
let's
layers there.
let's talk about this. I have this vision in my mind of like, on one hand, totally carefree, dancing, feeling, vibing, like eyes closed. I'm safe to express myself, right? And then I see this other side, which is this fighter. And even if it's the competitor, it's not, doesn't have to be like I'm in a fist fight with somebody that called me an asshole, but like competitive fighting, right? This aggression. And being able to play in both those spaces. Burning Man is a lot of open. It's a lot of dance, right? There is some achievement there. There is some survival there. If you're caught in the middle of a dust storm at 3 a.m., there is a little bit of like, how do I find my way? But here's my question for you. How have you learned to flow in and out of the, and I don't know if we want to keep using masculine and feminine energy or alpha and omega or whatever polar ends of the spectrum. One is open, one's focused. How do you flow in and out of that? How has Burning Man taught you? What do you see show up? How do you balance that version of you? Because the Joshua who's focused, by the way, and like can get people on their bikes out to the playa to do the forgiveness ceremony on time, right? To structured, right? You have to be able to hold that and this soft space how do you do that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And for me, there's multiple layers to explain it, but it's like we live in a life of duality, which means there's going to be both. And it's how fast, how adaptable can we actually move between those is what gives us that flexibility. So it's actually it's not the fittest that survives. It's the most adaptable that survives. So for me, it's exploring the edges. And I recently did a 4-month feminine cleanse, even where I basically said no to all sexual porn, all types of external energy, everything to like refine that feminine in myself. Cause I tend to be actualized on the side of the masculine where I do create, and I blow out. I burn my receptors. I go into adrenal fatigue. Like that's been my old habit. So I've been doing the last 3 years of really working on applying the resiliency tools, which a lot of the resiliency tools are integrative work. They're internal work. They're nurture, self-care. Like that's a lot of the feminine aspect, spaciousness, self-care. What do I need? Actually paying attention to what we need and giving it to ourselves. So for me, it's that same contrast of like, whatever I push this way, I have to rebalance it, or at some point, something's going to go offline. And so for me, the ability to balance those is what allows me to navigate it. So at Burning Man, there's a lot of external energy going into building the camp, creating the camp, holding the space of the camp, being on like lookout for problems or what's happening, which is a lot of that masculine. But I find the feminine for me either came in the form of nurture through the other feminine, interesting enough as it was, like holding space. There's a lot of value I get from feminine energy. And again, it can be expressed through a man or a woman, but protecting the feminine, being seen by the feminine, being acknowledged without looking for, but it naturally comes the more we're able to hold a safe container, as well as my own self-care. Like my first couple of years, it was just a full party. And then I think as I've gone, I did 4 years sober. Like I've done a lot of different aspects and I flexed into a lot of edges out there. But I'd say now I've learned the balance of self-care. So the night I was coming back for self-care. That's why it was a perfect night to connect with you, because I was like, no party tonight, no exploration. Tonight's about reconnecting. I totally have space. I'm present, grounded, sober. Like, let's work in this. And then it was just self-care night, right? So I think that balance of the more we learn our own self-care, the more we learn our own, let's say, connection to our own feminine, we don't have resistance to it. So we're able to flex into a more nurturing, flowy, playful, whatever those aspects are that would appear more feminine, because there's no resistance to it. We can just move into it. And then at the same time, some men can really access that, but struggle with the focus or the driven or the getting shit done. So the more we can, like, where's your edge? If you're listening to this, where's your edge? And which side do you have more resistance to? My challenge would be, can you lean into that edge? Could you learn to get into it to the point where it becomes a power source for you versus an area that you avoid or try to hide or cover up? Because that's what I did with the feminine. I would hide all the areas I thought were weak, and I was almost overly trying to overcompensate, which actually I appeared more feminine, interesting enough. And once I was able to go into my femininity, embrace my femininity, love all of it, it actually brought out more masculine energy, because I wasn't, I guess I'll put it in application to business. If I'm driving and never take time for heart, self-care, anything else, essentially it's like taking an axe to a tree and never stopping to sharpen the axe. Like I would just hit harder and harder and work harder and harder, be more tired. Once I learned how to sharpen the axe, I'm like, oh, I can work less time, be more focused, more present, and more productive, because I'm able to go, pause. Let me fill up the tanks. Tanks are low. I'm running out of gas. Let me fill up the tanks. Let me change the oil. Let me prepare maintenance on me. And now I can come back. So I guess that's how I see it. And dance, play, expression are all forms that fill up the tanks or transmute heavy, dense energy. It moves that energy into something else. So they all fill up the tanks.
Dude, totally. And here's a big breakthrough for me. I danced for the first time in my life, probably, and enjoyed it at Burning Man, right there in the camp, right where. And here's the thing, I want to tell this story because this is me learning to play in this masculine and feminine energy. And then, like you said, being adaptable, being agile in that space, right? And I just always feel uncomfortable on the dance floor. I got like one move. I'm constantly like judging myself. I think other people are judging me. Like, it's just terrible. I hate it. Tatyana likes to go to ecstatic dance. I can't think of a worse way to spend my time than do that shit. But dude, I was there and I looked over at, Russ at our camp. It seems like he's always grooving. Like whenever I look over at him, he's just like, dude, right? And I'm like, Russ, tell me about, I said, we're sitting there at the camp. I go, tell me about your relationship to dance. He goes, I fucking hate dancing. I was like, what? Dude, you're always dancing. You're like one of the best dancers I know. He goes, I've been working at it. And then I just proceed to interview him on how he views dance and how he's like, dude, I spend so much time in my head as a leader, mapping, strategizing. This is my chance to get into my body. And when your body's in it and you couple that with what's in your head, now you're super powerful, right? Because there's an energy that's expressed through this body. And so I went out very shortly after that conversation and I said, I'm going to close my eyes. And this is the DJ, a couple people dancing. And I'm like, I'm going to close my eyes and see if I can feel this music. I'm going to let the music instruct what my body does. I'm going to totally connect. And if the music tells my arms to flail out to like this, I'm going to do it. If my music says to stop, I'm going to try to let the music totally take over my body. And it was not long, maybe a minute into that, I'm like, fuck, I'm dancing, man. Like, it feels good. I know it feels good. And then Tim, my buddy, who's seen me not dance for a long time, came up to me. He's like, I don't know what just shifted in you, but you're moving like you're loose. Your body's loose. You're moving. And I go, I know, I'm doing it, man. And it was such a great moment. And then I went out with Tatyana and dude, she was so attracted to that. She was drawn to that. It was beautiful for me to feel it. It was beautiful for her to see this. And then I was able to also switch. And when I felt that side of the spectrum, when I felt that looseness, I had contrast of what it was like to be driven and focused. Now it felt even more powerful to be in my masculine state because I could see what the other side looked like and felt like. And it was awesome, man. And I decided that when I came home, I was like, I'm going to just let my body move more. So I'm pumping gas at the gas station. I'm dancing now. I'm just moving my body more. And I've never tapped more into my masculine at the same time. I now have further edges. I have pushed to the left and to the right on that spectrum. And it feels fucking great, man. It feels great. I have greater range is what I have right now. And that's what it's interesting is this range, this space, that's sort of like a great metaphor for Burning Man. It's like, you could be as close to somebody as you want, but you can also find an immense amount of space out there.
Well, yeah. And just one thing to ground it in for kids, because I think as everybody's listening, like at the end of the day, there's lineage trauma, and we're a lot of times replications of the behavior patterns and the ways our parents' nervous systems were wired and how they dealt with certain experiences. A lot of times where our trauma comes from, either with parents or with our peer group. So as we break free from our own lineage trauma, we're able to now model that to our kids. And I have guys that throw dance parties, which hated to dance before, but there's a lot of trauma or heaviness or tension in the house. And they're like, dance party. And like, they've created different ways of moving into that, where everybody starts to create a dance party. And now you're bringing kids in. So when they have a tough day and they want to go into their fight or flight states, we're able to catch the household and go, hey, dance party time. Yep. And once you get moving, you can move that out of your body, because it's just energy. It's just energy, tension,
moving
pressure.
Energy.
And so it's like, that can all be lessons to the house. And now that gets to be a lesson to share with your kiddos of like, hey, you notice them tension, rigid. You can find indirect ways to say, hey, why don't we go dance it? Or why don't we go get some movement in? Or why don't we hit the punching bag? Like all the things you're practicing.
That's right.
Direct application to saying, oh, how do I find that in my kids? Which one is they? What do they need? What's going to move that in them and get them regulated, grounded to have fun? Because what happens is once you get present, it's just a cloud that's there. And once the cloud moves, like your sunshine comes out again and you're back into the moment. And so it's just, how do we move through that cloud in a way that gets us present, back, connection. That's really what typically we're born into connection. Pain and trauma happens in connection, and then we're trying to deal with it on our own. And we actually need connection to heal it. So if we could be the connection for our kiddos, now they're learning to lean into us. They're learning to reach out, tell us what's going on. And it requires us sharing a little bit more like, hey, I had a really tough day. And guess what? I hit the punching bag. Oh, I feel so much better. Or, hey, really tough day, dance party. Guess what? We're all feeling better. And we start to show them and model to them what we can do as a family unit. So now we're doing it back in connection.
Dude, this is so right. This is so good. And you know, what's coming up for me right now is like, my work is energy work. If I looked at my life and all these, if there were chapters, I am in the chapter right now of energy work. That is the space I'm playing in. And I'll tell you, if it was a couple of years ago and somebody would have been like, I'm focused on energy work, and I'd be like, that's a bunch of bullshit. like it's, you know, that just sounds like somebody who's trying to sound important, you know, or tap into some, you know, like space where somebody can't disprove it because it's all energy and there's a lot of room for like interpretation for, you know, selling your bullshit. But the truth is that in my body, I feel it. And that's why I'm getting sold, is because I'm feeling the difference of this energy and that energy. And I'm playing with the vibe. Oh, and Burning Man was such a great place to play with that and watch Preston be in flow, like flow into this camp and flow over here. And what is it like to be dropped into the moment? What is it like to be in flow? What is it like to read the energy? And I remember at the very end, we were all dancing. We were out at some art car in the middle of the desert and we were dancing. And Stephanie looks at me and she goes, "We love you." And I go, "You do?" She's like, "Yeah, we love you." And she goes, "By the way, the John that's here right now is a very different John that we met at the beginning of the burn." And I was like, yes, he is a very different person. And this group, you know, you talked about blocking the exits, right? This group, just because they held this beautiful energy, they let me go through my shit. And then at the end, they were there to celebrate with me. And dude, I have mad respect for the community that you've put together. It is incredible. It is, if we go back to the beginning and the intent of this conversation, it's like Burning Man was a playground for me on how families operate. That's what it was for me, how families operate, how the energy moves, how the variety of people are, that it's like every moment of every day, the right person showed up right at the right moment to tell me the thing I needed to hear. It couldn't have unfolded any more perfectly. All the way up until the last night when I went out with Tatyana, we had the time of our life. And there was this one moment, I think I shared this with you, where, do you know the camp? It was like 2 doors down. It was Infinite Love. There was nothing happening there all week long. Literally, I'm like, this beautiful tent, this beautiful Infinite Love sign, nothing's going on. And dude, we stumble in there at like 3:30 in the morning, and there's music and art, and we're laying on these cushions. And did I tell you this? So dude, Tatyana's like, "Where are we? This is amazing. What did we just land in?" And I'm like, "I don't know. It's crazy." So here's what happened. This was a spontaneous gathering of the legendary artist, Amanda Sage, and the Burning Man DJ Goldcap, playing for about 30 people in this tent. And we're laying down and they're serving fresh kimchi pancakes at 3:30 in the morning. And dude, the painting that she is painting is literally a painting of the playa and the masculine and feminine energy play of the playa. And this all happens on the final night of our adventure over, 6 days of playing in the masculine and feminine and thinking it's the end of our marriage and the beginning of a new marriage and meeting Joshua and all these incredible souls. Tatyana's like, you cannot sign me up fast enough to go back to this thing. I am a burner for life. I will never not go. I'm in it. And that's what I'll say about that. I mean, I am so tempted because if we had 5 additional hours, you and I would break down 50 additional radically amazing concepts that you can feel into and you can learn and you can be transformed by. But I'm looking at the clock and I'm realizing that's not going to happen today. Final words from you, man. I mean, we covered some ground here, but how about this? Here's what I'd invite you to do. People are listening to all this and that naturally might have the question, John learned from Joshua. How do I learn from Joshua? Why don't you take a minute or so and unpack as much as you want around the work you do, how men could connect with you, give them an invitation and whatever explanation you want.
Yeah, thank you. And first, it's been a pleasure. Such a fun conversation, and really love rapping with you. And we could go in so many directions. It's just so much fun. But yeah, there's a couple of ways. One, I am rebuilding my website, so it's kind of outdated from a number of years ago. That should be done in about a month. But you could reach me at Joshua Michael Wenner, which does have all the programs that I'm running. They're just a little outdated, so that'll be updated soon. Or just Instagram or Facebook. So same thing, Joshua Michael Wenner, easiest way to find me. And I have a men's community where I do teach nervous system in that as part of the core curriculum for leadership training. So it's leadership resiliency for men that want to focus on better maps, better tools to navigate life and lead their lives. And it really does incorporate the heavy accountability and structure of that masculine. And it also incorporates maps to figure out where we're at, how we navigate it, and very focused on the nervous system so we can become more aware, and tools to actively reset it or put you into a regulated state. I also have been working with veterans and first responders for a long time. So I train fire departments, police departments, SEALs, Green Berets, like a lot of the hard warriors. And it's the same work that you were doing of getting into the heart, getting through, taking off the armor, learning to communicate with family. So a lot of leadership and resiliency training for first responders and veterans. That's called Valor Warrior Resiliency Programs. And the men's work's called K4 Men. I'm about to put out a documentary. So it'll be finished this year. It's called The Gift of Grief. And it's my own personal journey where I've spent a decade actually filming my whole process and the whole journey that I went on. And it's really a story of converting pain into purpose, because really it's about, we all go through suffering, but if you can turn the suffering into meaning or purpose, that's what gives the meaning to the suffering when you have purpose for it. So a lot of my own, trauma, pain, trials from the past, I've converted those into serving and making a difference for others. And that's what gives meaning to my suffering. And so those are the main ways. And then I also do one-on-one for typically high achievers that want the one-on-one support, that want to have high accountability, but want to use all my tools to help them get a result. And usually it's to get into the heart. That's typically what it is. It's to get deeper into the heart and to have healthier relationships. I have a lot of high achievers that are really good at business or their body or externally achieving, but that takes a lot of armor. And how do they take off the armor to get into the heart, which is going to require the hard work of getting into childhood wounds, childhood patterns, and a bunch of creative tools and ways to navigate that, to really re-put ourselves back together, get in a line like who we want to be with who we actually are and how we behave and how we show up. So it's really learning the emotions, how to manage emotions, how to manage the nervous system.
Gentlemen, connect with Joshua. Do yourself a favor. Get that done today. You want to be in his orbit. You want to be connected to the work he's doing. I knew very quickly, I was like, this is going to be a long time. Like, we're going to be friends for a long time, and we're going to create and build and serve and be there for people. And I will for sure make a decision to be there for someone in the future because of the way Joshua was there for me when I needed him in the middle of the night. And that ripple will for sure continue beyond me. And I'm grateful to have a model, of a grounded, rooted, solid human that could really serve in that moment. And that's because Joshua's done the work. That's because Joshua created the camp. He had the family. He's been through the experiences. He's done this and that. He went, he's done the burn in different ways. And because of all that, because of that experience, you could hold space. And men, for you out there with your families, like, you've been in training your whole life. All your experiences, all your trauma, all your victories, all your trials and errors, and all of that has led you to the place now where you can really serve your family and you can bring to them your gifts, and you'll continue to grow. That's why we're here. Like Joshua said, we all need men in our lives, and we need to, it's not like we need to have it modeled for us once. We need to constantly have that advertised to us, marketed to us. Like, we should be surrounding ourselves with people where who they are is the marketing message that's permeating our subconscious. And that's what's driving us.
Yeah, there's a really powerful quote that I love that says, you are the efficacy of your work. So literally how you show up in life, from how you take care of your health, how you respond in triggering situations. Like the way you are is a model of your work. So
Totally.
if you want to make corrections, how do you do deeper work so that you can become the example that you want to be?
Yeah. And my invitation, guys, is that as you go do this work, to remember that you have these two energies within you, and they're different ratios, and there's different ingredients within all of us, of course. But for most of us, I subscribe to the fact that we have a masculine and a feminine energy, an alpha and omega, whatever it is that you see this polarity, these two yin and yang, the sun and right, it's light and dark. It's all of the duality that we talked about, and this exists within you. So how can you, number one, accept that it's all there? And how quickly can you move? How agile can you be? How flexible can you be to utilize those tools as you need in each moment, right? To be able to open like this and receive, and then flex and make shit happen. That is the play that we are constantly in right now. So, Joshua, can't wait to have you in Austin. Can't wait to see what unfolds. I suck at predicting the future, so I hesitate to try to guess what it might be, but it sounds like it's going to be really fun. Tatyana is grateful for you. If she were here, she would express that. She loves you. She thinks that you're present and powerful, and it's great to also, by the way, see you be able to light her up and also feel really safe, like having you around Tatyana. I just felt like over time, it's like, man, I would trust Joshua with Tatyana. Like if he was like, I'm going to take Tatyana out dancing on the playa, I'd be like, awesome, enjoy. Like it's going to be a great night. And that says a lot about you and who you are and how you show up, that like, not only men, do you want to be able to protect your women, your wives, your partners, but you want other people that are in your corner that have their back also. That's a whole other level of like providing for your family. It's not just will you show up, but will other people show up in a time of need? Joshua, you are that guy. So thank you for being a first responder in my life at Burning Man. And I look forward to more. Guys, we'll link to all of Joshua's stuff in the show notes at frontrowdads.com. And again, I mentioned it earlier, we're going to be getting together in person in Austin, December 2nd through the 4th. I hope you can make it. It's going to be a great event. Give yourself that gift. That is the sharpening of the axe. If you've invested in business masterminds in the past and you truly put family first, then wouldn't your investments follow your values? I hope to see you there, guys. And thanks for listening to the show today.